Welcome to the MOGL podcast. I'm Tim Bryson, Director of Athlete Education and Compliance, and I'm the host of our show. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning community member, welcome back. As y'all know, the MOGL podcast is dedicated to educating all NIL athletes and brands on how to ensure compliance, how to maximize NIL activity, and how to make a difference in the ever-evolving NIL landscape. Today, we're back with a very special edition. A very special edition as this episode is not being recorded via Zoom or another streaming platform, but in the beautiful town of Winona, Minnesota. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest, the one, no other than Eric Schoh. What's up, Eric?
Not much.
How you feeling, bro?
Good. Glad you're here.
Listen, we've been together all day, right? You heard me talking all day. You heard the podcast voice turn on just now. You ready?
I'm ready.
I think we're in for a good show today, bro. And so one thing as I'm looking at your bio, right? A lot of different accomplishments at different schools over the years. But the one that stands out the most to me right now is that you're a recipient of the Under Armour Athletics Director of the Year award back in 2015. Remember this?
I do.
What was so special about that moment, getting that recognition back in 15?
Well, there's two parts of it that stand out for me. One, it's an award where you're nominated by your peers and voted on by your peers. So it's something that other ADs thought enough of me to get me that award, nominate me, vote on it. And the other part of it is there's several ADs of the year from different levels that are recognized at a luncheon at the NACDA convention in June, and they ask one athletic director to accept on behalf of all of them. Yep. And they asked me to do that. So in a room full of about 2,000 people, I got to give the acceptance speech for, I don't remember, 8 or 10 ADs that got the award that day, and I was never so scared in my life.
Wow. Did you have a beard back then? Hair?
I did not have the beard. I had the flat top and the clean shave.
Well, as I'm looking at your bio again, bro, I don't know if you've seen a list on Instagram or maybe Twitter, right? The swaggiest ADs across the country. You're number one, bro.
I don't have social media platforms, so no, I have not seen that.
Well, I'm sure your athletes will confirm when they hear this podcast episode. We're going to jump into the conversation, right? Our podcast is segmented into 3 different segments. The first of which is really learning more about your story. I think especially for ADs, as someone who's been on a college campus, I've been a college athlete, seldom do we hear the stories of ADs from the AD's mouth, right? So Eric, as you're talking to us today, what is your story?
Well, I suppose I'd start with, I knew I wasn't good enough to use sports as an athlete for a career, so I tried to figure out how could I do that. And yep. So I looked at what administrative jobs are out there at the professional level, fell in love and had kids and decided I didn't want to live in a major market where pro teams are, so I started looking at college athletics. Was fortunate to get my first job at Montana State University Billings, a Division II school. Right. Fell in love with Division II. I've spent my whole career in Division II. If you look at my bio, I've been at places like the University of South Dakota and Cal State Bakersfield, who are Division I. Yep. They were Division II when I was there, so all of the schools I'd been at the time were Division II. And just, show up to work and work hard, and the next opportunity would present itself. And I was blessed with a wife that was supportive to follow me around the country. Yeah. So we met in Iowa and moved to Montana and then to South Dakota and then to Bakersfield, California, and then Nebraska, and then moved home to Winona. I grew up in a town 25 miles from here. So family's important to my wife and I, and now we have the opportunity to be close to my family and her family.
Super dope. And shout out to wifey, by the way. But before we go any further, for those who are familiar with D2, they know about D2. For those that don't, they don't, right? And so you got the mic, you got the audience. What's so special, and I'll call it special too, about Division II athletics?
Well, for me, it's the relationship that we can develop with our student athletes. We're not like the big business of the Power Five. Yes. And so I get to interact with our student athletes on a daily basis. If I don't, it's a bad day for me. But Division II is life in the balance. So you get to be a student athlete, but you also get to be a student. Mm-hmm. And hopefully when you talk to our student athletes later, they'll confirm that. But we give scholarships. You can give partial scholarships, full scholarships. So I think we have as talented as student athletes as many of the mid-major Division I programs do. Yep. So the quality of our competitions, the abilities of our student athletes are, I think, second to none. But yet you still have that relationship with them, and they still get a chance to be a college student while they get to pursue the sport that they love.
That's real. Yeah, I regret. I looked at D1 schools coming out. I walked on to Coastal Carolina. But looking back, I didn't know anything about Division I, 2, or 3. But I definitely would have considered D2 a lot more, just given the nature of, again, athletics and the academics piece. But understanding, like looking at your resume, looking at your bio, right, looking at all your accomplishments, what is one thing not on the internet, if you will, that we should know about Eric Schoh?
Well, that you should know about me, there's nothing that you really need to know about me. Been asked that before. I guess I'll share with you. I was the chair of the Division II men's basketball committee for 2 years. I was on the national committee for 4. The last 2 years, I was the chair of it. And the last year is the year that Division I, II, and III men's basketball all had their national championship game in Atlanta around the Final Four. And they do a salute celebration prior to the Final Four games. So the 2 Division II teams got to go there, so did the 2 Division III teams. And they talk to players and coaches and do all that. And because I was the chair of the Division II committee, Jim Nance introduced me one time. Yeah. Jim Nance has no idea who I am, but he introduced me one time.
That's definitely a fun fact, Joe. And before we're moving into segment 2, as we think about your life to this point, right, your career to this point, one moment that you look back now that you're just extremely proud of in your career?
I think I'd go back to that opportunity to speak on behalf of the ADs of the year. It was pretty special.
You remember the message at that moment?
The message that I gave is we don't get here alone. I used the old, you feel like a turtle on a fence post. You're not sure how you got there, but you know you had help to get there.
For sure. Segment 2, great transition, Eric. Segment 2, we're here to talk about NIL, right? We didn't come from Philly and DC respectively, but definitely our company represents a number of different cities across the U.S. But Winona State is choosing to be a first mover, is what I like to call it, right? A trailblazer, and setting the standard on what it means for Division II athletics to prioritize and really include NIL as part of the holistic athlete development experience in college. Talk to us more about why this is important for you, right? Because we've seen some hesitation at all 3 levels, particularly in the NCAA model. But why is it important for you to really put this, front and center to say, yo, we can also do this too?
So what's always, or should always be front and center for us is our student athletes. Yep. So every decision that we make, you can agree with it or disagree with it, and can tell you the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. But when a final decision comes, hopefully we've made it because that's the decision we think is in the best interest of our student athletes.
Very true.
So the NIL landscape is still yet to be defined, I think.
I agree.
And so we're kind of out there doing the things that we know we can do and trying to be careful and cautious. But one thing that worries me is the well-being of our student athletes, and I don't want them to get into a contract that's bad for them. I don't want them to miss out on, well, I didn't know that I had to pay taxes on that. And so I think partnering with a company like MOGL gives them the opportunities to do those things, but it also has that connection and resources for them to learn how to protect themselves in that space too, because I think everybody on Winona State's campus has the best interests of our student athletes at heart. I don't think everybody in the world has the best interests of our student athletes at heart.
I'd agree. So one thing I mentioned earlier in our meeting today was about how our philosophy is structured, right? It's all about empowering, right? Empowering not just through education, but also helping athletes learn how to take ownership of their learning, ownership of their NIL activity, ownership of their career, right? How do you see NIL being a part of athletes taking ownership of their experience at Winona State, given, again, we've now been in this era, a year and a half, right? You mentioned just the undefined landscape, but there's an opportunity for us to begin to shape what this looks like here in Winona, Minnesota.
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for them at a young age to start to learn how to market themselves and represent themselves and put themselves in a position to make that next step in their career and their life.
Great.
And we talked about it earlier in the staff meeting about the power of a thing like LinkedIn and how that's this social media networking type of a deal. MOGL's going to fit really nicely with that.
Agreed.
It's going to give them a spot that they can go build their reputation and resume of what future employers are looking. They might only get a $50 NIL deal through the MOGL platform itself, but over the course of 4 or 5 years as a student athlete, they should be able to build much more than that.
Agreed. So let me ask you this, yo, because Tommy and I talked before, and I want to get up and run around right now, but Tommy would legit stop this podcast recording and get us back on track. But I'm like, yo, there are Division II and Division III athletes, particularly stick with the NCAA model, who just, even Division I AA, who just don't think nor believe that NIL is for them, right? And as someone, again, I've worked in Power 5, I've worked at the NCAA National Office, I can understand why that may be an assumption, but it's simply not true, right? And I don't know how else or how different I can really drive that message home. But like, what is it about, from your perspective as AD, like what is it about the current landscape that people think like, this is not for me? This is not for D2, it's not for D3.
Well, I think some of the stories that you hear about NIL deals that are in six figures, and you've got these nationally known student athletes.
Sure.
We don't feel like those numbers fit, and we're not known on a national stage. But and this is what drew me to MOGL. This is what set MOGL apart from other your competitors. Is the NIL is supposed to be a student athlete and business relationship, and we're going to do this above board and do this the right way. And the student athletes on our campus are influencers on our campus and in our community, and they're this whole demographic that businesses want to reach and need to reach. And if they can monetize some of that, whether that's on a small scale or a large scale, I think that's an advantage to our student athletes. I think that's an advantage to the businesses. And look, every business is looking at the power of numbers. Mm-hmm. So tonight, hopefully, we're going to have 375 student athletes that all help a company through MOGL. Mm-hmm. That should be powerful.
I agree. And I think, again, tonight, we'll talk about tonight in just a second, but I'm going to get the name wrong. No, I'm not. Blooming Express.
Blooming Grounds.
Blooming Grounds.
But you went to the Blooming Grounds Express first.
It's going to continue.
So that's why you had that difference.
Blooming Grounds is prime, right? We went to Blado's earlier. Blado's prime.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's good. We got some cookies.
Did you get the maple Long John with the bacon on it?
They didn't have it. Someone else did the same thing. They didn't have it. But you think about NIL and storytelling. I mean, there are businesses in the town, right, in the city, that have been untapped, right? There are businesses in the town that also could benefit from having athlete influencers, athlete creators, athlete entrepreneurs partner with them. But as we think about NIL, particularly from an education standpoint, right, we can't do it alone, right? Winona staff can't do it by themselves. MOGL can't do it by ourselves. So speaking to alumni, speaking to donors, speaking to the community members, how can they best support, what we're building here now, given that we're partners in this space?
Well, I think that we're going to have a system. You have developed a system that is very easy to use for our student athletes, our alums, our businesses, and if we can all commit to using that platform, it makes it very easy for everybody that's involved. And so I think the education piece is how to utilize that system and that tool that you all have developed. We run everything through there that makes sure that we're above board and compliant. We don't get our student athletes in trouble. We don't get our coaches in trouble. We don't get the businesses in trouble. Yep. So I think as we reach out to those who are supporting us, if they have questions about NIL, I feel like 6 months ago I didn't have good answers for that. If they ask now, I feel like we have good answers and we have good support and we have a good structure in place thanks to you guys.
That's awesome. Looking 6 months ahead, we're now, late 2023? Where are we going? Where's NIL, where we think it's going? I think everyone has an assumption or an idea, but again, given like your perspective from the seat that you sit in as the director of athletics here at Winona State and in the Division II model, like what are conversations like either at the D2 AD level, right, and or thinking about what athletes are asking coming into college in 2023, 2024, and beyond?
Yeah, so like 30 years ago, I had a crystal ball, and I had all the answers.
Yo.
I don't have any answers now. I think I get dumber every day, but
sure.
I think specific to NIL, there's a lot of unknown out there, and I'm either naive enough to think, or whatever you want to call it, that this is going to level off and it's going to become the new norm. Mm-hmm. I think like the transfer portal, where oh my God, and how's that going to affect and ruin things, and we're still learning and adjusting to that. But I think that has a plateau as well, and that's going to become a new normal. How are you going to control the NIL money when it's going directly to the student athletes? Well, we've had booster clubs for decades. How are boosters not just handing money to student athletes? Well, we're controlling that. Yep. We're controlling the message. We're educating student athletes. We're educating boosters. Well, I think we can do the same thing in the NIL space so that we're doing it the right way. And I think 6 months from now, we'll be closer to that. And I think 6 years from now, people will look at it and say, well, why was this ever a concern?
I think so. Man, we said the same about the transfer portal, as you mentioned, as one of many things that have changed over the last several years, and obviously given COVID and the implications that we've had to adjust and make since then as well. But I want to take this to segment 3 because I think this is the point of the conversation to where we really drill down like what we want our audience to take away from this conversation. Definitely a brief conversation, but one that is packed with moments that we can continue to unpack and unravel alongside, again, each other as partners. But as we leave this conversation today, Eric, what are 3 things you want our audience to remember and leave with after our time today?
I guess first, specific to NIL, I'm assuming you're talking about. First, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and at Winona State, we're committed to always doing things the right way. 2, there's a platform to do that with now, and so, please work through you guys or us or the appropriate people on staff so that we do those things the right way. And I guess, steal the point that you made a little bit ago that, there's value, huge value in Division II and Division III student athletes and what they can provide and connect and do and represent. My kids are all adults now, but when they were growing up, didn't matter what school I was at, I would trust any student athlete to care for my own children. That's what I think of our student athletes. That's the pedestal that I put them on. And so I think if you're out there and want to look at Winona State student athletes as a way to help your business, they will represent you well. I know they will.
Respect. I got to tell you this, Eric. We met at Blooming Grounds. Not the Express, but Blooming Grounds. And we walked in, I was like, yo, this man got the hair, he got the hat, he got the boot cut jeans and the boots. I said, I gotta go change. I gotta go change and put my ripped jeans on, man, take my anklet out. And the reason I say that is because you showed up as yourself, right? You showed up in your authentic way. At least for me, I was something like, you know what, I can also show up in my own authentic way to present who I want to the world. In a very similar way, I think with NIL, people are always cookie cutter, right? What's another school doing? What's another conference doing? But one of my favorite quotes is that we don't fear the future, we shape it. And so I definitely look forward to shaping the future of NIL education across Division I, II, and III, like in the NCAA model, alongside you as partners as both MOGL and Winona State continue to move this engine forward.
Well, it sounds good, and I'm excited about it now because of our partnership. And 6 months to a year ago, I just really wanted to ignore NIL.
Sure.
It was scary. It was unknown. It's not really for Division II. I had all those thoughts that you brought up, and now I think we're in a good spot. And all 375 of our student athletes going to become millionaires off of this deal?
Probably not.
No, that's not.
No.
But is there a niche? Is there a space for it? There is, and I appreciate you guys for shining the light on that and helping us move forward.
No, for sure, we'll be back. But I'm not gonna let you go and end this podcast without you telling us what product you're using in your hair right now.
I don't use product in my hair. My wife tells me to. She's a hairbender by trade, and
We'll talk.
I use a hat.
I need a hat too. I got a MOGL hat. I'll put on after this. Eric, good talking to you, man.
Hey, man.
Everyone else, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MOGL podcast. I look forward to having a continued conversation with how we can not only educate all athletes and brands on how to ensure compliance, but also how to maximize NIL activity, how to make a difference in the ever-evolving NIL landscape. As always, get paid, get MOGL. Peace out.